Right, guys. So welcome to day 5, the class. I wanted to ask you if you're new, make sure you click on the link to answer the quiz, because starting this week, I already have a draft, but I need to add remaining people. And we're gonna have 4 groups split into 4 groups actually. Each group will have a lead, and you will plan some extra sessions with the homework that you'll be assigned. I will have some extra call with the leads to get the feedback, to have some extra discussions. So what I'm going to ask you guys to ping me directly if you want to be a lead. So I know I have your quiz, and actually a number of people wanted to get to be a lead. And I really appreciate it. So ping me directly if you're still interested and would like to take the responsibility. Again, what's the goal? You will have separate channel that private to the group, where you're gonna decide on a time. It will be twice a week. So so I'll assign you to that group by end of today, and I would like to ask you tomorrow to decide what time works the best for you. So maybe my recommendation will be Wednesday and probably Friday, or if it works better for the weekend, that's another way. Just set up a 30 minutes. Doesn't need to be a long one. If you want a longer, great, right? But make sure you get together in a small group and you discuss all the questions, all issues, and you can share screen and things like that. Okay, so that's a request for you as a continuation of the course. And make sure you respond to the quiz if you have not done it yet. Otherwise, I'll just randomly assign you to a group if you don't respond basically by end of today. Okay, so let's get back to our class. And we started to look into Java previously. And now it's a new world gets opened. So we have so far looked into predefined steps, right? We started looking at the selectors because that's what you do day to day. Sometimes, by the way, it's a question in the interview, like what's your day-to-day look like? So you should explain it, like it's not like you go and smoke in the morning until the lunchtime, right? And then get back to work. You need to really think that through, like how do you schedule your day, right? And then what's actual work look like for you? Because you need to spend a lot of time to properly design test cases as QA engineer. And that's something, if you work as QA engineer, you really can use as a good argument during interview, because you can tell what kind of work you do, right? So it definitely will help you to design good Cucumber test cases or scenarios. So that's, you spend time on it, right? So essentially, this is what we have used so far. It's really for learning purpose, right? But you're going to write your own, and you're going to do it soon. So we already started doing this, but you're going to really do it for WebDriver very soon after we go through Java. Essentially, a lot of time you spend designing test cases, make sure it's reusable, it's properly done, right? Because it will go through code review. Somebody else will look at it. And if you design it wrong, right, you might end up redoing a lot of work that you do. So make sure your test case looks good. The second part is essentially, once you have test case, you want to automate it, right? You want to make sure you put proper selectors inside of the Java code. And that's how your work is doing. You'll be looking at the site, right? You'll be working with it, and you'll be inspecting those elements using some tools, either plain ones or most likely some specific like ProPath. So that's what we started with, basically using selectors and XPath. And the second part, as I mentioned, you want to make sure you're comfortable with IDE, how it works, right? So what's the design, what's the debug mode. We have not looked into official debug. However, we have started looking at the console, and that's already debugging, okay? And I wanted to actually take a little step back and take a look at the previous Cucumber cases and potential errors that might have occurred. Because some of you ask me this question, some of you kind of playing still with Cucumber these cases, and you ask me, okay, how it's really like, okay, this error, how do you deal with that error? Or how do you deal with this error? And I want to review this kind of so-called exceptions that will happen inevitably as you do the work, or they will happen inevitably as you run the test cases. So I want to take a look at our as example, and I just want to demonstrate you different kind of errors that might happen. Okay, with example of quote side. So if I take a look at, like, let's open a quote, right? So this is the one. This one we played last class, and I want to see potentially what might happen. So, and what kind of error would it give, right? So let's say, for example, if you so let's play with this scenario, okay? Then the predefined 7. So this way, actually, I think it's a bit of bug, so I have to probably restart my IntelliJ just in a second, okay? But while I'm waiting for it, can you guys share what kind of errors did you receive? Like, what's something confused you maybe in a console? Can you share your experience? Like when you run scenario, something wrong, or what really makes it more complicated for you personally?
Probably error messages that you don't understand in the console when you run tests.
Okay. So okay, that's exactly what I'm going to review. So that's that will be great. So let me actually get back and share screen, so it looks like it's fixed. And I'm going to also give you a quiz that will be around the same topic. Okay, so you're going to also work with the quiz. But let's take a look at this scenario. So it has 3 parts, right? So first part, actually 2 parts, right? The filling out required fields, okay, and then verification. So when I mentioned 3 parts, because we have kind of special way to handle the pop-up, the dialogue that you fill out with the name and last name, and that's why it's kind of in a way 3rd part, because other fields you just have one-liners. So let's see. So for example, what if I made this error, like accidentally deleted something, or maybe put wrong XPath, or let's see what happens in that case. So it runs, launches, and then it's read, right? So one thing I want you to take a look at is if you scroll to your error, right? You don't need to like try to figure out, like see it's a lot of information, so it's easy to get lost, right? You don't need to kind of go over and try to like start really with an end, right? So your scenario always starts from the top. So again, the first line here essentially is just your JDK that you used in the launch string. So to remind you, this is the one that I checked, right? If you don't have it, then it may be looking pretty busy. Let me show you. Yeah, so some of you might have like looking like this, okay? If that's the case, you need to uncheck this small icon, soft wrap. So it will actually make it one line. You have like really busy like this, right? So it basically shows you the whole class path. That's why it's so long, right? So basically all the libraries that we have used through the Maven. So all the libraries that you use in the project, they reference as class path. So it works properly, but you don't need to, have it taking the whole screen, right? So it doesn't distract you. So you uncheck this if it's checked. Normally it's unchecked on Mac, but it's normally checked on Windows sometimes. So just if it's looking like this, then don't touch it. The second thing, it's on the top here, right? Like you can see informational logs. This is just telling that it's using the Chrome version, in my case, 95. If you have older version, it will try to download the older driver and use it. So it's the beauty of the library that we use, that's called WebDriver Manager. So essentially, that library just downloads automatically. So it just posts those as information. Okay. Then it tells you that it's has started successfully, and basically session is created, right? Okay, and it's each one is using the different dialects. So in our case, it's W3C. That's most browsers are using, and all Chrome's are using. Okay, and then it's our scenario. So you see, the first line is green. It's been successful, and then the second line has failed. Okay, and you don't need to like go and try to like scan. You go from the top. So this is basically red, right? And right under the step it failed, it tells you what's the problem. Okay, so this is a like type of error that might happen. So I'll give you a later reference to WebDriver specification. That's unique. That's unique, universal. It's universal for all different languages. So essentially, whatever language supports WebDriver, whether it's JavaScript, the Python, Java, obviously, Scala, whatever you like it, Ruby, it is using the same specification. So it's underneath it using the same API calls, essentially, right? And I'll show you later and give you reference when you move from Java to WebDriver as a next step. But for now, this is it's called exception. That's an error type, right? That's what something wrong happened. And you can see here, it's a special name of the class in Java that represents the type of error happened. Sometimes it's generic enough, like just tells you error. Sometimes it says runtime exception. Sometimes it tells you more specific, like this one, no such element exception. Okay. So, and from the name of it, you already know what's happens, really, right? So what's the problem here? Yeah, can you guys tell?
It couldn't find the.
Yeah.
It couldn't find the element because of the wrong XPath.
Exactly. So it's basically look, the XPath is valid. So it's not wrong, it's valid, but there is no element found because there is a difference between this exception, which says no such element exception, no such element unable to locate, and actually tells you, see the selector it's been using right there. So even if you might not see it here, right? When we would not write XPath in Cucumber, it will not show up here in this step, okay? But it will still be same in this line. So I would recommend pay attention to this line, which tells you that what's the problem, first of all, right? And second, what XPath is trying to use. Sometimes you have dynamic XPaths generated. Sometimes you have like all different type of selectors. So, and you can always take it from here, right? Just copy it from here. In that case, what I recommend doing, sometimes it's confusing, like you might work with a site and you look at it and it's there, okay? Somehow like, let's imagine it's there, okay? Let's imagine it's like this. But the same XPath might not work here. Why? Because sometimes you just do different steps in automation. Sometimes you have certain error that reproducible if you go step by step in automation, okay? And in that case, you can feel yourself in the shoes of developer. Sometimes they look at the bug and they cannot reproduce it. Same here, you see it's red, right? But locally you cannot reproduce it like in your browser. So I'll show you some example a bit later in 5 minutes. But for this example here, it's just not found element. And the way to do it is that you go with first step. So you need to refresh, okay? Make sure while you refresh, you also have in the network disable cache checked. Okay, so it's not using any cache. So now it's clean. And then from here, you actually can try to find this XPath, okay? And it's not found, obviously, so it's wrong, right? And then you look, okay, what else can it be? And here, obviously, just missing the character. But the whole point is that it's a valid XPath, but there's no element, okay? So second example here I want to show you is this, right? That's also often happens, especially for beginners, pretty often. Okay, so what's the difference here if you look at this error? So what's the difference?
Invalid selector.
Yeah. So element not found, and in this case, it's invalid selector. So different things. Okay. So in first case, it's a valid XPath, but it's just not present on the page. It's not in DOM tree. Okay. In this example, it's just syntax error basically. Okay. And it tells you a bit more information. So invalid selector, it means that you're wrong. Okay. It doesn't sell invalid XPath here because it supports all kind of selectors like CSS, for example, also, right? But in this example later on, you can see it's syntax error, failed to execute evaluate on a document. And then it says the string, this, blah, 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 is not valid XPath expression. So it clearly tells you what's wrong, okay? And sometimes beginners look at the screen and just have no idea, like they cannot figure out, and it's written here, right there, okay? So it's because of a lot of information, but you don't need to get all information. You just need to get the first line here, right? That after the exception, it tells you what's wrong. So just get used to it. Get this information from the type of class. This is a class name, okay, full class name. And you can see here it's part of Selenium package that we're using. And that's the exception. That's a class name representing an error. And essentially, it's just invalid XPath here. So that's kind of the problem in this case, okay? So one more example I want to show you that sometimes might happen, okay? It's kind of weird, strange to reproduce it. And I want to fix this one. I'll probably use something like here, okay? Like this guy, right? Like, for example, what if I use, in this case, not input, but star, okay? Because it's technically, if I copy this XPath and I go, I see it's only one found, so it's valid, right? It has a unique name. It seems to be a pretty decent XPath to be used. So I'm using it. And then I wanna, okay, so what do I do here? I kind of open the URL, I type one character, then I introduce, basically I trigger error to happen, so it's negative test case, right? So I wanna validate what if user made an error. I mean, well, it's short enough, right? And then I kind of continue to interact, right? In this case, I type second character, right? And I use again star, okay? And let's test it out. We'll run it. So the only thing I changed from input to star. You know, out of sudden, I have this kind of weird error, which says, see, like now more steps have passed, okay? So all those green. So I'm looking at this step which failed. I also have reference here, right? You can click on it, so it shows up. But I recommend you to essentially go from the top. See, essentially here on the left, you can filter, right? You can click every single step, and it'll show you if there's some extra information around it, okay? And if you click on this error, right, it just filters that error only. So you see, like, it starts with the whole step. That's might be useful if you have so many different steps, long scenario. Otherwise, you go back to the top, and it shows you the whole picture, okay? That's for now, I recommend go with that. So this is red, and in this example, it says element not interactable. And what do you think is wrong here? Why is it not interactable? So I kind of looking at it, it's like, why is it not interactable? It's kind of weird, right? So it basically tries to type into it the B, and it just typed A successfully, right? And I'm kind of looking like, what's going on, right? So I just checked it's displayed, and I'm just typing second character. Why is it not interactable? Like, okay, I'm typing it, right? So A, B, all good. So I'm, what's going on? What do you think it might happen? So this is a bit weird error that might even take some senior Kiwi time. Any thoughts? Any suggestions like why it might happen? Now, what's the next step? So how do we debug it basically? Debug is not necessarily like you put breakpoint. Debugging is you trying to figure out what's the bug really, right? So what's the problem? So
I'd wait for a couple seconds.
You wait for a couple of seconds. Okay, that's good suggestion by the way. So you want to wait before this step, right? Let's try it.
Yeah.
It's a good point. So I'm gonna before this error happens, right? I just say, and I wait for I don't know 2 seconds, right? Okay. And actually, it allows us to let's do it in 5 seconds, okay? Because it allows us to really see if it's correctly looking, something may be wrong, right? So let's run it. Okay, so it looks okay. Check the error, right? And should wait 5 seconds and should type. And same error happens again.
So it didn't select the yeah,
It didn't click in the field.
yeah, it didn't click in the field.
When you typed A, so after that it's not finding username.
Yeah, see, like the funny part is I just used the same step here and it worked, and exactly the same step. Maybe I can do another A, right? Let's try it again. So like people try to figure out, which is pretty wild, right? Like why would it not work second time? First time it worked. And the second time, and you might think maybe, you know what, it's maybe an error, right? That is the same error. Maybe you want to put, I don't know, like 5 seconds, but I want to type myself. Like, is it maybe it's not, it's a bug, right? I cannot really type it. Let's test it. So this happens. Okay, can I type into like B? Yeah, it works.
Or I guess I got it. What's happening?
Still a problem. So I did manually and it worked, right? But automation doesn't work. So is it automation wrong, or like what's the problem here?
Sorry, can you find one more time this XPath in CrowPath when you already have the character there?
Okay, so it says, okay, let's restart it. You say type A, character A, right? And then can you try again? Yeah, let's take a look. You see
Yeah,
that?
2 element matching. Yeah, that's why I like.
This is the tricky part, right? So and now look, so if I just refresh it, right? And if I type something into it, and if I do it like that, see, like now I see something wrong, okay? So essentially, if I just go into page, right, and you try to figure out, it's everything good, right? But that's what I point, right? I mentioned before, I'll show you this example. Sometimes you have to follow exactly this step, this. So essentially here to see what's happening, you need to trigger error, right? That's when it happens. So when you type into it, then you maybe click submit, right? Or you just focus out, it's also saying, right? Essentially, out of sudden, this XPath finds 2 elements. And let's see what happens. So below here, it actually shows you which element is it. So it tells you the input here, right? And input looks exactly like this guy. See this input and that input, okay? But there's another one, you can see B, that is on top of it for some reason, okay? So what's this about?
Maybe you need to clear the field before you check it again.
You see, like the problem here, okay, you're saying clear field, let's try it. It's okay. So you're saying, okay, we wait, let's make it 2 seconds. And you say clear, right? And say, and I clear element of this spot. So let's just try this. And then let's try, in this case, AB, right? 2 characters. Let's try this one.
No, it will be same error because it's not gonna find.
See, the problem you actually almost got it, but it kind of slipped away, right? Because look, the problem is that it finds 2 elements. What did I tell you? I said always work with 1 element at a time. You cannot work with 2. Okay. There are some examples, of course, that you might want to work with. You need to know what you're doing. Okay. So there are some examples where you basically want to load a number of elements and work with them. And we'll do it actually when we learn array and WebDriver. Okay, I'm going to show you an example. It will be actually homework and we will review it in the class. But in this example, you interact one element at a time. And out of 7, it's 2. Okay. So you, in that case, you should not go with that. Okay. So it's, see, like the tricky part is that initially it was only 1. And as you type into it, it still was 1 until you have error, right? And if error happens, you out of 7 have 2. Okay. And the problem is, and how do you find it, is that there's 2 options. Okay. So one option is you look at, you inspect this guy, right? And it shows you this element. And it also below shows you element structure here, right? But it doesn't show you like the patterns. Okay. So like it found another one, B, but I have no idea where is the parent, where is located. So the way to go for it, you might go and actually click inside here, right? And do Command F or Control F and type here, okay? And it in the way it works, it kind of will actually highlight, see, like it very nicely, location. So it doesn't show 2 at the same time like CropPath does, but it actually focuses on different elements. See, like this one and this one, okay? As I just click enter, okay? And the first one is visible, so you can see it here, right? And I click second time, and it's not visible. But is it something similar maybe that you guys have remembered? What's this?
Yeah, that's part of the summary.
Exactly. So it's a part of summary, but it's not visible yet. See, like the way it works that, and again, you have no idea how your application will work, but it will work in all different ways. So the way this one works is that as you start typing fields, and if you trigger an error, right, it kind of triggers summary to appear, but it's kind of still hidden, okay? It's not showing yet, but it's already in kind of structure inside of this HTML structure, okay? Inside of DOM tree. And it would not be an error like this one. Like even 2 elements would be okay, as long as the first element was input, okay? And here's the tricky part. If WebDriver finds 2 elements, and you try to interact, it will always interact with the first found, okay? The tricky part here, the first found, it's actually now a different element, which is read-only. It's a B element, and it's hidden, okay? So the one that you see is input, but the second one is just hidden, and somehow it's higher in the HTML. You don't control that, okay? So my point is that you don't need to know all these mechanics, but what you should know is that if you see an error like this one, you reproduce it manually. And at this point, you see 2 elements found. You need to change XPath. So say, like, okay, it worked first time, but second time now it finds 2. I don't need to, okay? Even if it works, I don't recommend 2 because it might take some other element that you don't expect, right? And it essentially validate it and it might pass, who knows, right? That's even worse if it passes then and essentially checking something else then you don't want to check. So bottom line is that in this case, there's 2 elements with the same name. One is input and one is B. B means bold, read only, which is later part of summary, okay, screen. So that's why in this case, you simply need to change the text path. How do you change this? So it will be unique.
Input.
Yeah, just put back the tag name.
Yeah.
Example,
Slava.
You might want to go with the tag name because it really specifies, yeah, I want input, I don't want anything else. Yes.
Slava, and if we can have such issues with using asterisks, maybe just to be on the safe side, it's better to use always the tag name rather than asterisk.
If you ask me personally, I would go for tag name, but what I want to just let you know that there are some teams who say, you know what, if there is a name or ID, you must use like we don't use, essentially they don't need necessarily ID or a name. They say if you have an attribute that you can rely on, you don't need to use tag name. And again, as you not senior engineer, if you're not senior yet, I would rather go with what they say. Okay, so just don't argue. Okay, but yes, if you have options to go with, I would go with tag if that's not big deal. Okay. Again, as you know more and more HTML, then you would make yourself a call. Like sometimes you leave the tag name, sometimes you remove tag name and use star, basic asterisk. Like in some other cases, like you have like div or span or h1 or like whatever. Like there are some interchangeable elements, but in this example, you can see you get the bug if you use star. So that's argument against it in this particular example.
Thank you.
So, okay. Essentially the fix here, and again, so why is it giving this error? Because it's find the first element, and first element appears to be read-only, even hidden, but it's higher in HTML, okay? See, it's here. See, this our input is here, and this B is hidden instead, okay? It's different. So that's why it actually takes that B. It's like if you put this B here, okay? It's one found, and if look, imagine if I try to use this from in this example, because that's the first element found. And if I go with this, let's see what errors will I get. It's exactly the same error, right? So that's what you would get if you use star, because that's the first element is B, okay? But if you use input, sorry, if you use input, then it'll be okay. So that's kind of a bit weird examples. Yeah, see, like, okay, I still use star here. Okay, that's same error. So element not interactable basically is something that it means it's you're trying to enter something in it. Like now it works, okay? You try to enter something or interact with it somehow, right? And you cannot because it's read-only, it's hidden, it's disabled, it's whatever, right? So any of those reasons. Should see.
Slava, where does it says like it's hidden or read-only, but because it is in a metadata?
No, it's just a type of error, right? Basically, I'm explaining to you what it means. I'll give you reference to the different exceptions, right? It's like you asking, like, what does it tell you? There's not like, I mean, it's just a type of error that happened, right? We already looked at element not found, invalid selector. Now we're looking at element not interactable. Those are all different types of errors that you see in the console if something wrong, okay?
Oh, no. My question is like, while we were looking in the DOM structure for that bold B element, where does it says like it's hidden or read-only?
Oh, okay. Are you asking this? Okay. So first of all, look, if you look at this, right, it finds two elements. So it basically, if you want to interact with it, like it will always take the first one if you have many. Okay. The first one, it means on the top. On the top, it's I mean, you don't control it, right? It's like sometimes you like it, sometimes you're not. In this case, you're not like it. And the code generated on the top. Okay. And how do you know it's not interactable? Because first of all, it's hidden. Okay. It's not something you like. You see, like I click on it and there's nothing. If I click on this element, see, it highlights it. See. So first of all, you need to look at it with your own eyes, and you see it's visible. You only can interact with something as a user if something is visible. Okay. This is clearly not visible. You click on it, there's nothing. Okay. Number one. I mean, even if it was visible, it's still not something you want to interact with, right? Because it's like a completely random, different element. Okay. Also, I mean, you can make decisions it's not visible because it's just you don't see it, right? If you know a little bit of HTML, then you can go up, right? You can see the whole container is hidden. You can see here the style display none. Okay.
Okay.
That's another reason. I mean, technically, if I remove this, and as the says, see, out of sudden it's visible. See. So the way you type into it, and this generates this guy on the flight. Okay, so let's say a B, see, it actually types here, and then email John. Oh, I see, like, see what happens. This is hidden, right? Well, I'll use type, but then it shows up as summary when you submit. But the JavaScript prepares it somehow, you know. So that's kind of the internal mechanics, and clearly this is, even if it's visible. Look. It's read-only. How can you type into it? Because you want to type into it, right? It's read-only. So
right.
That's an error. Let me show you something else also, like as example of similar error. So this one, it's invalid element state, right? It says invalid element state exception. Let me try to type into this field, for example, right? Like application. This is another B field. B means bold, and it's read-only, clear, right? You cannot type as a user, right? If you try to type in this field, for example, let's say from very beginning, okay, it has a ID. I just want to show you what kind of error would you get. So you're looking at the exceptions, right? And in this case, it's clearly I'm just messing up, right? But I want to show you what kind of error. See, like it tells you sometimes invalid element state, or sometimes it tells you element not interactable. So both are the same, right? Invalid state means like it's not in a state to type into it because it's disabled, right? Or it's not interactable because you're not supposed to type into it, right? That's not designed for it. Make sense? Any questions?
I have one question. However, it's not related to this lecture, but for the first lecture,
Yeah.
there are two methods, right?
Yeah, let's make sure we focus on this topic. I'll get back and step back after we review it, okay?
Okay.
Slava, I have a question related to this.
Yeah.
With the previous example, the previous predefined that you were doing, for me, it passed when I put the wait time after whatever you put previously, not before the line. It was after the line. For me, it passed.
No, it will not pass it. You guys have different scenario, okay? But I can, if you wanna test it, right, and you wanna play with it, you can just copy this scenario, okay? I'm gonna paste it in the chat, so you feel free to just paste in your computer and then run it, okay? I'm gonna just run it right now. Not this one, but I wanna change this to this. And you feel free to add if you want. Wait, it's not gonna pass. Let's give 1 second. So that's where it fails, right? I'm gonna just paste it in the chat, and you can just take it for your reference, okay? So yes, you said about number of characters typed. What was about it? Any questions around this exception? Is it clear?
Just one question. So the invalid element state exception, it's actually like disable button or something, right? So
Yeah,
it can be interactable, but not in this case.
It looks, yeah, it looks like this, okay? So you can actually, let me show you, okay? So what I'm gonna do right now, I'm going to try another example, okay? What if I try to type into confirm password field and it's disabled? Let's see what kind of error do I get there, okay? So I'm gonna copy this XPath and you know it's disabled, right? From the very beginning. So let's see what do I get. So this is valid input, but it's disabled, okay? So and you can see it's an element not interactable. So this is pretty much
okay.
same error. And I try to type here, okay?
Okay.
Any other questions on this topic?
Just a quick comment about it. It actually looks like it explained another bug I had before. That if you look at that quote page and just like refresh it from the very beginning, you can see that the submit button triggers every single required label for all the fields.
Yeah.
But then if you refresh it again and try to reproduce the steps we were doing in that scenario, let's say you type A in the username and then click the submit button, only one label triggers.
Yeah.
And but if you click not with XPath, but with the JavaScript, it's actually going to trigger all the labels again. And I was curious, like, what's the difference? Are we actually clicking on that button with XPath, or is it just like triggering the event because it loses focus?
Yeah, so so you can see this is a very simple site, right? And even this site is giving kind of different hard time. Yeah. So technically, you should not. Your goal, of course, if you know your product well, you can definitely find much more bugs than usual. Okay, but your goal is not really to master that. Like your goal initially to understand this issue happens. This is what I do. This is so keep it simple. But to kind of get a bit deeper in your question, you don't control how developer write code. In this case, developer has written that it's hidden, like kind of summary gets created underneath, right? So when you really submit it, it's kind of ready to show it, okay? And when you use JavaScript, it's one behavior. When you use different ways, different behavior. So the point is that if you use normal click, just say click, right? And I'll show you in WebDriver how to do normal click and how to do JavaScript click. So if you use normal click, it actually tries to mouse over and actually trigger click on top of that area, okay, using coordinates. So if you use XPath to figure out the coordinates for this button, and then a normal clicks triggers normal click as if you did with mouse, okay? When you use JavaScript click, it's a different story. It's actually, it is JavaScript click, right? It's just, you kind of use a shortcut, right, into the depth of the site. And sometimes it can save you a lot of time, right, and effort, but you should avoid it whenever possible. Why? Because as you said, right, it actually changes behavior a bit, right? So technically, in some cases, it will be exactly the same, but in some cases, it may be a bit different. Okay, so you should really use it wisely, and you should know what you're doing if you use JavaScript click. I'll talk about it later when we actually do coding of it. But for now, my point is that try to avoid using JavaScript click if possible. There are some exceptions. I'll talk about them later. Okay, but the takeaway: use normal click. That's exactly how a user would click. Okay, and then you would can expect that if you do it right, then it's the same behavior as you would click as user, right? And something shows up, blah blah blah. Okay. All right. So that's so this is pretty much. I think we have enough talked about this not interactable thing. Again, it's either hidden or read-only or disabled or whatever. There was some side question in terms of like number of characters, like 1 or 2. Like, can you ask this? What's the question? If you're talking, you're on mute. All right, that's fine. So let's move on. So we have this scenario here, and we have this specific error that happened. So let's see. So we have element not interactable. Let's see what else might happen also, potentially. So there's one kind of error that used to happen often, but now it's not that easy, okay? But actually, I think it used to happen. I think I did show you this in a Google example. Let me show you this. Yeah, so I want to make sure this is passing. And for Google case, I think we already looked at it quickly in previous class, but let's now focus on exception, okay? So this is a Google, right? And let's say I don't use JavaScript and just normally write it. Okay, this is passive. Let's see if I change this to 1. Okay, so this is another exception, okay? And this one, it happens. Okay, this is actually not interactable error. This is right. It's just
you mean when element is covered?
Yeah, element right? Covered. Yeah, I'm looking at that.
Yeah, you told us. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this example is not interactable. It's a different story. But there is also a problem. Let me actually maybe quickly show it to you just as example. I think I can show you on the UPS page. It's a good reference, okay? So you'll see that quite often, and it's good as a package of all exceptions to review that. Let me see what I have here. So, for example, this one, So I want to show you. So you have this global page, right? Let's say if I want to, that scenario, I want to say not a predefined. Let's say predefined eat. So essentially you want to open the URL, right? So this URL I want to open. So this is supposed to, let me wait first, right? I put 10 seconds. So I want to take a look at it if this allows me to do what I want. So, okay, this is probably the one that not covered anything. What I'm going to do, I'm going to change resolution, okay? So it actually triggers that potential element covered. Say I want to do this. You'll have this error quite a lot. So I want to, in this case, I want to, actually this is different, right? So I want to do say 800, or let's say 54 by, I want to change the actual height. So the width and height. Okay, you can see, right? So I can even do it probably bigger. 800 is okay. So this is what makes it complicated. If you have sticky header, it kind of makes it more tricky to interact, right? Let's say what I want to do is I want to click on this plus first. So I want to click on this plus, and then I interact more. So let's look at that XPath first. So let's see. So can you guys help me with the XPath here? What can we use here as XPath for plus?
/span attribute class.
Okay, let me go. By the way, the benefit of CropPath is that if I try to type XPath here, for example, look, if I say, okay, you know what, I know what XPath is, it's probably going to be this one, right? Data map, EPS, SVG, MEDIS, something like that, right? And I start typing it, like see, like it now it's gone. Okay, so I kind of lost it. Where if I have it as a focus after inspect, so it's here, and I type exactly same here, it's not breaking my kind of focus, right? So it's still easy to describe. So I say //a, I use attribute data map, and I want to just say MidEast, right? So this is looking good. And then I want to click on that span, right? So //span. Let's use that, okay? So I'm going to say resize it, and I click. Okay, so let's see if that gives us what we need. Okay, so it actually, see, clicked successfully. Notice that, so it scrolled to it, right? And it actually just expanded. See, like it scrolled to it first, okay, before clicking. It did scroll, so it worked well. But let's see, what if I want to now click on Africa here after, okay? So I want to click, so I clicked at the bottom, clicked at the top. In the tricky part here, if I'm a user, right, and I'm looking at it, I would scroll so it's visible, right? But WebDriver would scroll, it will think it will be visible, but it will be still covered by this sticky header. So that's the problem. Let's actually try to click. It's very similar, right? It's a just different data map. Again, do I know what data map is? No, I don't need to. Okay, so all I need to know is that there is an element. It has unique reference. It actually has ID image map 0, which I think it's like 0 from the first one, right? But I don't like it. So data map is more explanatory what's going on. So I'm using that. Okay, and I'm using to click on a span. So span is right there. Okay, so okay, I'm clicked on this. Let's give it 1 second, right? And then I'm gonna click on another one. Okay, this guy. And I'm going to give it another second after. 5 seconds after. So click here, click on top, right? It's supposed to click on top. And it is not clickable. You can see, so initially it clicked scroll down for Middle East. So my screen is actually smaller, right? And in that example, I made it smaller. And initially it opened like that. It scrolled the Middle East, clicked on it, expanded, right? And now I want to click on Africa. So it scrolls up and clicks while it's still covered on this guy, okay? And you get this error. It says element click intercepted. So in the past, it used to be unknown error. So it was more kind of weird. And you had to read the description, which still told you something is not clickable, okay? So this is very, very well-known error. You can find it on, Stack Overflow. So it's a lot of things happening. And people try to fix it, solve it. Some people get confused, but it's very self-explanatory. So it's actually very informative. First of all, it tells you what's happening. It says intercepted click. It means that something got in the way, all right? And not only does it tell it, it actually, you can see it, it remembers XPath you want to click, okay? So it tells you, it shows you element that you want to click. Look, so here's element it found with your XPath. And you can see it is span, right? It looks good. And it tells you the coordinates because it really mouse over coordinates. So it tells you coordinates within a browser. Okay, so it's from top left to the bottom. So it actually, the 0 is a top left corner of the browser. So here is 0, 0, and here's our X, and down we have I. Okay, so X to the right, Y to the bottom. Okay, that's how coordinates works. And it basically tells you that X is 9 to 5 and Y is 41. Okay, so it's location of this specific span. And then it tells you also what it covered with. So you see, it actually tells you that this is actually covering it. Okay, this one is, it's covered by this element. Essentially, it says other element got a click. So it clicked successfully, but it didn't click on, it didn't get to that element because it tried normal click, right? As user would. The only problem, it did not scroll to the right element. So it's not covered by sticky header. Okay. So that's kind of tricky part, and you will get a lot of errors like this. And essentially that means just it's covered. Okay, that's simple as is. And you can even look, like sometimes you don't know what it covered with, like weird, right? So you can actually analyze this element, and you can even try to write XPath for it. So let me see, UPS Analytics class. Okay, so let me try to write XPath for it. Sorry, this one. So it says a class. It told you this, right, element. And you can see there's actually clicks on this guy. See, so it happened to be, say, Africa plus got covered exactly by this element underneath. That's why it actually said this is clicked on instead. Okay, and it didn't want to. So it's pretty self-explanatory. So those errors are very informative. Just need to kind of get used to reading them. So first of all, you have a step that failed. Then you have exception, class name, which sometimes by itself is self-explanatory. And then you have the actual message that comes with exception that tells you some extra information. In this case, it tells you element that used to want to click, the coordinates, and something else that in a way. Okay, and you can even like use that information to find it what's in a way. So now let me see if I change this to JavaScript, what happens. So exactly same step, same XPath with JavaScript. Okay, so I think I did extra double quote. So see, like, okay, this is actually also a good example. So somehow, like, I made an error rate, and I just used double quotes. So in that case, it did not recognize a step. So it's yellow. It thinks it's undefined. Okay, so it's not an error, but it means it's not implemented. So basically, it said, you know what you have written, I couldn't find. Okay, so that's what I could not find what you have written, basically, you can see it's yellow, and you can see that one is actually tells you the snippets, right? So basically, you don't need to look more as long as you see it's step undefined. So there is no exception here, but it just tells you that, you know what, this is not defined step, means that it's not implemented, means that you have to implement it, okay? Or you have just typed by mistake some other step that, I mean, you just made an error in selecting a step, okay? In my case, it's clearly I use double quotes, so I just make it work, and you can see it's back to normal, okay? Let me run this. You see now, look, it did click on Africa. So look, see, it clicked on Africa, and it worked well. So that's what JavaScript does. JavaScript doesn't care, is it covered, does not, and it works just anyway. Make sense? So why do you think it may be a problem? Why do you think this may be a problem? Can you guys tell me? Why don't you use JavaScript all the time? So you don't worry about like being covered and
because it's not reliable.
No, it is reliable, so it worked pretty well. It's actually more reliable than this click because it will fail less.
Don't you have to figure out if UI works?
Exactly. So that's exactly the problem. Look, so imagine this: you have a bug where the whole screen, disabled. There's some modal dialog opens and it would not go away. For example, like let's say you click on this guy, right? And this model opens, right? And it's stuck. You cannot close it. It's just stuck, okay? And then you want to, interact with email, the whatever, right? And as a user, you cannot do it. And you cannot close this dialog. But JavaScript would do it, okay? So that's one of the problems that exists. And that's why, like, essentially, if you use JavaScript all the time, it will have a risk. It will introduce a risk that the real UI bug might be there that you would not be able to detect. So you have a scenario green, but it will be actual bug, most likely in UI. Okay, so that's why you should avoid using JavaScript. There are some cases where it's inevitable. It's like otherwise it's so complicated, but you should really justify, right? So if you put this way, then probably somebody in the code review asks you like, why do you use JavaScript? You should explain why. Okay. And that's the tricky. Sometimes you might have an interview question like that. Who knows? Like if people say, what's the common error? Well, you have this element covered by other element. Should you use JavaScript or not? Blah blah. So that's a good conversation also that shows that you have experience. Okay, so and you'll know it yourself after you go through this class, right? And after you have things like that and be able to avoid them. So how do you you should actually scroll to the view so it's visible, and there is a way to do it in a WebDriver. I'll show you later how to do it. Or actually you can use JavaScript to scroll. That will be a safer option as well. Scrolling with JavaScript is safe, okay? But clicking not always. It might let you skip some UI bug.
So Slava, in this case, sorry.
Slava, isn't there in WebDriver an option just to scroll?
It is, yes, it's buggy. It's a buggy. So I think they probably fixed it in version 4. Version 4 just went out, just like I think after we started class. So we cannot switch to it. I mean, I think it was like next day after class started because I updated all the libraries before in same day as class started. But in version 3, it's just buggy. We're gonna, once we get there, I'm gonna test it. Okay, I'm gonna test it in 4 also and see if it's fixed. But you can definitely scroll in WebDriver. It's just buggy in Chrome. Okay, so sometimes you have these issues also in your tools and libraries you use. So we'll get there once we learn more about WebDriver. Okay, but yeah, this is a good example, just to demonstrate that, you know.
So Slava, is this buggy considered bug? Is that why we're using JavaScript instead of XPath?
No, I mean, that's what I said, right? Sometimes you have to go with that. That's why it's good to know. But you should avoid using it if possible, and use scrolling, right? And I'll show you later how to do it. Make sense?
Okay.
So let's move on. So that's a good example that good to show. And I think the last one is, let's see, maybe something like this. See, like sometimes you don't get error at all. And the tricky part, if you try to run this scenario, right? Let's see, I'm gonna write this scenario. It just doesn't tell you anything, okay? Sometimes it actually shows you weird errors. I think we need to enable debug or something, so it's not showing anything at all. So if it doesn't show you and you see like it's valid, right? But it's just weird. You should pay attention to red. See, you can pay attention to this piece, and you can see her also red here. Okay. So if you have some syntax error in Gherkin anywhere in the file, it will not allow you to run scenario at all. Okay. None of those scenarios. So it sometimes happens when you're a beginner, or maybe even not beginner, but accidentally just type something, you know, like, or in this case, I tried to comment like with Java comment, and it's not Java. So it just doesn't launch anything, okay? And it just parse errors, okay? That's what the problem is. So, yeah, this is like info logs. So this is, the logs is fine, but it just doesn't show. In the older version of Cucumber, it used to show the actual stack. Okay, it's probably need to enable it in the new version. But if you have something like that, I mean, rarely it happens. Pay attention to top right highlights, or pay attention to this slider. See, like if it says you red, it means you just click on it and highlight it, what's wrong. Okay, so just clean it up. Okay, you can mouse over. It tells you also see unexpected element, basically this guy. Okay, so that's. Doesn't happen often. It just sometimes see like now it says all good. Typos is like, don't worry about it. It says as long as you have no red, that's your problem. Okay, I fixed it, then I ran it. It works. Who can tell me what's the comment symbol in Gherkin in Cucumber? How do you put a comment?
Hashtag.
Exactly, hashtag like this. Okay. Or you can use a shortcut command slash, so it just comments out. Okay. Or you can just select whatever lines you want, command slash. Sorry, command, yes, command slash. Exactly. If you do it again, it removes the comment. It's very convenient shortcut. So that's pretty much like exceptions we have reviewed, guys. So again, to remind you, we have looked at element not found, so no such element. We have looked at invalid selector, right? When you made an error. We have looked at invalid element state or element non-interactable. That's another one. And we have looked at element click intercepted. That's another one, when you essentially have a element covered by some most likely sticky header or footer or some pop-up. So that's pretty much what error is about. Sometimes you also might have, you know, like other kind of errors, validation errors, like not specific WebDriver errors, but it's assertion errors. I want to review a couple of those. Okay, so in this example, we are looking at result, right? When we launch it, we're looking at result. Let's say I want to mess it up. Oh, you know what? This is actually going to pass because it should not have welcome on. Most likely, it'll be okay, right? Let's say I put something like this. So let's see what happens. This might be a more errors you get like that because it's potential a bug, and it might be a bug, right? So if I look at this, it says all green except verification. So you can see right away it's verification because it started then, right? So you might have some error like in when, right? When, to remind you, is an action. So you want to get to the verification step, okay? Using when. So, so if you get some issue here, it probably also can be a bug. Why? Who knows, right? But it was not the purpose of test case. But if you see then, it's pay more attention to it. It's written right way because the engineer assumed this is something that verifies some behavior of end-to-end test case. Maybe a lot of steps like that were just for this single verification. And it says essentially it should contain John Doe, right? And I just mess it up. So it says it does not. So you can see in this case, it's called assertion error. It's very basic error. This is not WebDriver anymore. See, there's no Selenium here. It just says Java language assertion error. It's basically said something is not equal something else, right? That's what we try to verify. And you can see here it's expected actual this, right? To contain this. So you can actually give a look, right? Take a look at this, and you can see where would it supposed to be here, right? And here's what you expect. Here's what you have actual. So you kind of visually can look at it and also verify, right? So if it tells you a such an error, normally it gives you what's actual, what's expected. It's kind of useful. Questions on this? Okay. So that's assertion. Very similar, by the way. Sometimes it may be a comparison failure. It's very similar. It's like assertion or comparison. Tries to compare, fails, right? Assertion tries to assert. Assertion is basically a verification that will fail if it's not correct. So the last one, for example, what if I want to actually wait for an element, right? So I want to, it's called delayed assertion. What does it mean? So sometimes you want to right away see and verify something. Sometimes you want to wait for something, right? So say then, so you want to wait for something to happen, right? Basically, you want to say then I wait for element with expand. Actually, wait. Yeah, let's say to be present, right? Let's say you want to wait for something to appear, to be present or to be visible, displayed. Or let's say to be present, okay? And I want to put some expand that is invalid, okay? Let's say you want something to show up and it's not there. So it's not right away there, but it takes time sometimes, right? So it's not failing right away. Look at this, right? It tries to, it kind of waits for it. And now it waited, timeout happened. So it tells you timeout exception. Basically, it waited up to a certain amount of seconds. And you can actually see, so look, this step failed. It also Selenium error, see timeout exception, okay? And it tells you that something was supposed to show up and it did not. So that's what the output is. So, and it actually tells you how long did it wait. It says we waited 10 seconds and actually checked every fifth of a second. Okay, every 200 milliseconds it checked. So it basically checked 50 times. And total 10 seconds. And it did not appear after 10 seconds, so it failed. That's what you see as a timeout exception, okay? And you can see basically as a result of it, let's say timeout, but then it's caused by, so in the end it says, you know what, element not found. So it's kind of, it's called nested exception. So basically this is really what end result is, caused by, but this one is actually the wrapper, right? It waited for this, waited for it, and essentially did not get it. So element not found, but on the top of it, you see timeout. Make sense? So it's a little bit more complicated example, but if you read it, you kind of get what's happening even from the very top, right? So obviously you said something you wait for, timed out, so essentially did not get it, right? But if you want to go deeper, then you find more information like this one, such as XPath.
Oh, and if you wanted to wait longer, you know, how would you do that?
Yeah, see, like there's nothing here, right? So, and by the way, this is implicit wait. You actually waiting for something. You can configure it. I'll show you how to do it in WebDriver. So definitely you can change it to 0 to 5 seconds to 100 seconds, or like to whatever time you want. Okay. So I just wanted to show you this issue and how can it happen.
I have a question.
Sure.
So, like we see, if we have some error, it's stop to testing, but we have like more steps. How we can continue to test it?
Okay, so actually, very good question, by the way.
Verify.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a very good question. So, and here's a bigger question actually. And if you ask me this question, I would ask you also. And I ask you, should you even continue? Why should you continue? And spend time on the rest of the scenario? Can you trust if it fails at certain step? Can you trust what's the next, really?
It depends on what kind of mistake we have. If it's critical, yes, then we have to stop. But if it's something mild, then we can go on and just see the log, the result later on.
Yeah, so here's the problem, right? The problem is that this is a good in theory, but this is one of the examples that, well, there are some corner cases that you still use that. I mean, edge scenarios, corner cases. It's basically rarely, okay? That's what it means. Rarely do you use it in reality, but in theory it's good. But the problem is that if something happened and you wanted to continue, right? Do not fail, basically. That means that it's highly likely you'll just miss that error. Because believe me, if you have 1,000 scenarios and you want to automate as much as possible, right? You want to have 1,000, 2,000, like, I don't know. You want to, like, eventually you want to have, the goal is 100% automation or close to 100%, right? And your product is growing. Automation set also growing. So you initially might have like 10 scenarios and 100 and 1,000, right? Now imagine 1,000 scenarios, it's not that big. 1,000 is okay, right? Now all of them green, or let's say it's never possible, to be honest. Let's say it's a 950 is green, 50 failed, okay? So you want to check this 50 failed, right? Because you release tomorrow and you want to make sure its product is good. We want to double check, right? Is it a bug? Is it something that happened, right? Is it false positive? Basically, it's like a flaky test. Are you going to go to 950 scenarios and look at the logs and see if something maybe failed, but it's checked something else on after it failed? You know, highly unlikely. I mean, unless you want to work nights, right? Day and night, because you still have verified 50 scenarios, right? That failed. So my point is this: that in reality, you never use verification kind of concept. You always use assertion. Okay, and you don't want to use, essentially there's two points here. One reason is I mentioned to you because you just simply don't have time, and second reason is even if this fails and it kind of logs that it failed, right? And then it checks further scenario. Okay, can you trust it? I would not trust it. Like, okay, it steps somewhere in the middle, failed, right? And at the end it's successful. I would not trust this scenario because some step that it was important in my mind, right? It did not pass. So there's second reason like that. Okay, so that's why the rule is, especially for beginners, you always use assertion. You do not use soft assertion. Soft assertion basically is when you continue going. Okay, sometimes it's also called verification. So you don't simply use it in automation. Okay, you always use assertion, meaning that it fails, you fail the whole scenario. okay, it failed at the 5th step and you have like 20. Well, why you have 20? Why don't you have 10 steps? I would question, like, you should have small scenarios. You shouldn't have long scenarios. Okay, that's the first place. But again, let's say it's not possible. You have to have 20. That's fine. You don't trust the scenario, then you have to rerun manually. Okay, if you make it continue, you'll just miss their bug essentially. That will be worse case than you would see it as red, and you have to manually rerun the whole scenario. That's just a simple reality. Okay, it's just never enough time. There's never enough money to cover everything with automation, so that's always a problem. Now, there are some corner cases when you want to use it, for example, right? And sometimes you have some case, let's say you have very, very long scenario, okay? That takes hours, okay? Maybe it takes 1 hour, it's still very, very long. And you verify many, so it's like really long pre-setup, it checks like many things, many, it's kind of probably some loop or checks some different cases. And then let's say if something fails, right, the whole scenario stops, right? And then that's something that will be a corner case. You might even run the scenario separately from the rest of the suite, right? You run it like it takes a few hours, and then it always passes. But then you have to look at the logs and look at all the errors, really, right? So it's green, but you don't trust it's green. You look at the errors because maybe like scenario that checks very, very many conditions, takes hours to run, and then you maybe like a scenario itself has like, I don't know, like 100 loop runs, right? And then maybe like one of the 100 failed. And then you manually look at it, and you always look at manually, okay? But that's more like corner case where you might want to use verification and do not fail the whole thing. If it's like 5-minute scenario or 10-minute scenario, you want to fail it, okay? So that's the point. Okay, so let's move on. So that's what we looked at, right? So that's important information. It's also part of Java, right? So essentially, even that we look at it with Cucumber, right after we switch to Java. So this is Java already. Those are Java exceptions. Those are Java messages, okay, of exception. So that's why this is also part of Java piece now, which we are in. And I want to also review the homework before we make a break and continue with the next material. Let's get to Java.feature. And let's review the homework. I think we had a couple of string variables. Let's see. Day 4, right? So we had this task. It said, given I perform actions with this string and that string, and you can see those strings are pretty much the same. The difference is this second word here is all caps of a string. So we want to say print those variables in the console as they are, right? Print them uppercase, print them length, and so on and so forth. So let's just review it. And the second slide actually shows you the methods that you should refer to. So let's take a look. So here's our step, right? Given I perform actions, blah, blah, blah. So let me delete it as implementation. I want to remind you that there is a Java.feature. And this is actual top level, right? Cucumber. And we have created, first time we implemented step, we had an option, right, to create a definition. And we have created one. And you can see it's kind of organized in a nice way. So we have a features folder that has all the feature files. And they refer to a Java package, right? So definitions in this case, which has Java classes. And each class represents definitions. Basically, definitions means it's implementations of a step in Cucumber. All right. So it's just a way to organize your code. Sometimes when you have a lot of test cases, you have like more complex structure here. In our case, we will have a few definitions, but we don't need to create more complex. Okay. Why do we need structure? It's just to not get lost. Okay. We technically could have created one definition but that would be bad practice. You need to keep classes small if possible and specific to their needs, right? Including definitions. So in this case, it's just Java step devs, basically because it's we're learning Java, we have this step, right? Sorry, this class. And we're going to create more classes like that as we have some projects. So in our case, we have small projects. We'll go through small projects, many of them. And for each project, we'll have its own definition class, okay? If it's one big project like you're going to work with, you're going to have then different definition classes that will be focused on different functional areas of your application. Like it's a login, like it's a, I don't know, like accounting, whatever, right? So different, whatever is application is, like store, anything you want. So let me take a look at this specific example, right? So we have already implemented and created this class automatically. Couple of definitions, and I'm going to do one more. So once you implement the step, you can use it anywhere in any feature file, like this one, hello world, right? I can actually do it. It actually created this one, right? So I can do and hello world, right? So essentially, I can use it anywhere. There's no limit, okay? There's no problem to do that. In this case, it's not implemented step, so I have to implement it. Right click on the bulb. Sorry, just click. I can trigger it also by holding Alt or Option and hitting Enter. Go with step definition. And then here I have option to get a new file created or put it in one of those two that exist. I'm going to put it in Java step devs, click on it. And it basically creates that method. That's all it does, right? So it's kind of really nice. In older Cucumber, this might be regex, regular expression. You just never touch this, okay? If you mess up with step, you just delete this and recreate it, okay? Like delete it, recreate it, okay? So you don't need to ever do it yourself. If you're senior enough, you will know what you're doing. But if you're junior, you always recreate it, okay? To keep things clean. Again, this string goes into this argument. This string goes into second argument. We have two arguments here. What's the first thing we're supposed to do here, guys? After we see the step defined, what do you think we should do first?
Override maybe the arguments.
Yeah, not override. Override is special.
Rename.
Because yeah, just override is special. The kind of instruction with annotation. We'll use it later. And this one just rename. Yeah. So we're gonna name it like string 1 and string 2. So some junior mistakes is that people start, okay, my var, and people like some people do it. If you did it you beginner, it's okay, it's expected, right? But probably you should have taken an intro to Java course. But that's fine. You can learn. Just need to put more effort here as we go through Java. But want to remind you, this is a value of a string we pass as argument. Okay, this is a value of we passing, so you can change this to anything. Okay, so I can put my value. I control it from the Cucumber. Okay. Now, this gets saved in this variable. So variable name should not be value. Okay, it's a very big mistake to even assume it's somehow related. So this is just a string 1, and this is just string 2. Okay, here we had set message. Okay, we have the message which is like say, so here's a string. Okay, we get in this step, it gets into message variable, so we use it here. Okay, it's not like I do hello there, right? If I make this mistake to use hello there, right, it had nothing to do with the value. I can put here whatever else I put, and now I don't need to rename variable, right? So that's just a common mistake for beginners. If you did it, that's okay. Just make sure you understand that it's about how do you name the container. It's not inside of the container, okay? Inside of container, we have those two values, and that we're gonna now work with them, okay? So let's quickly do it. So first of all, we said printed, right? So for printing, we have sout and tab, or just put the whole thing system.out.println, and you print first one, right? And you print second one. So after you did it, I recommend to run right away. In my case, it's going to open a closed browser, right? But I don't care. So you can see I have quite a few steps. So to make it clean, I'm going to comment those steps. And this is what I'm going to focus on, right? So those two are printed, okay? Sometimes you, you can also do it this way. Look, I print something, right? I want to add something else, some information. So what I want to add is this, so str1, or string 1 plus str1. This is concatenation, right? So I have my own scalar value here, so and then I have actual variable value. Okay, so I can put right away here some comment, and then I plus the actual value. Okay. Here also I can do it this way. So this is first string, second string. So that's how I concatenate things together. So result is more clear, right? So when I read it, I know, okay, this is one string 1 and this is string 2. Okay. Just nicer to read. Any questions on this? Okay. So let's continue. So what else does it ask to do? So it says uppercase and length, right? Okay. So I'm going to just copy the whole thing. Okay. Just use this grouping. So this says uppercase, right? So basically uppercase means, so there is a way to call a method, right? So we have interacted with string by just printing the value. But here we can do, before we print, we can convert it to uppercase, okay? This would execute first, convert string to uppercase, print it, and then move forward. So here I can also do. What will happen if I print again? It's going to be uppercase also, or no? Can you guys help here? Well, I had printed them initially, then I convert to uppercase and print it.
No,
Every time is going to be different.
original.
Yeah. So this is not changes the string value. Okay, there's not changes the variable value. It only changes the result here, right? And it just lost. I mean, basically, it prints it and that's it. It doesn't save it in memory anywhere. So it's garbage collected. So you can see here, right? The first normal, the second uppercase, the third also as is the first. Okay. So that doesn't change. So okay, so next one is that length, right? So it says length. I can also change this uppercase. So it's clear what I'm doing from the comment. Always good in automation also have comments that explain what you're doing, right? So this one says length. Okay. So you see, I'm just calling a method. See, I have this instance variable, string 2. The value of the string 2 is passed in Cucumber through this annotation linked, right? That's automatically created for me. And it's actually passed in this str2. It means whatever I have here, okay? Gets saved in this variable, so then I can interact with it. So I interact with it by calling a method in it that will calculate the length. And if I print it after, then it will give me the length. Okay. So that's both of them equal length. Okay, so then let's see what else. Comparison. result of exact comparison into console, right? Ignore case in as is, okay? So I'm going to copy this and say basically exact comparison, right? Exact comparison. So what do I do to compare them? Can you guys help? What's the message here?
String 1 equals
Yeah.
dot equals, sorry.
Okay, let's see. str1 equals str2. Okay.
It's reference. You cannot, I mean, string
It's
is
dot
reference
equals because
object.
this is strings.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so let's test this. Okay, it's actually good good comment.
It will work because it's not a new object.
Let's test it. So, well, it says false, right? Why is it false?
Because string
Because
is
it's
a
not
reference object, so you just like do equal between references. So string has one reference, string 2 has another reference. Just use equals the method.
Okay, so
It's false because it's not equals.
It is strings. We cannot use equal sign for strings, correct?
yeah, let's try this. So you guys saying, okay, let's use equals method, right? So we pass a string 2 in the
It's
method.
still false too.
Yeah. It's also false, of course, because do you guys think they're really equal?
Because one is uppercase, the other one is lowercase.
Yeah, of course, that's why. So obviously it's not correct, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use this way in here. But here I'm going to try what you suggested first, right? So str1 equals str2. And I'm going to now change this to this, just to try it. Do you think both will be false? Sorry, both will be true or one will be false?
The first gonna be false.
Nothing gonna be changed because
The second one is going to be true.
True,
it's not
true.
nothing gonna be changed.
Because the same value.
Yes, it's false because you changed it in Gherkin, nothing.
No, this is actually even different reason.
But you change the references for string pool. So, I mean, you cannot do this with a string as object.
See, this is a different problem. Even. Not even that you said. Sometimes at the interview, they show you some code and say, yeah, what's the error in the code? And not always it happens, but sometimes it is happening. But
maybe you have take it into parentheses, no?
Yeah, okay, look. So where is the exact comparison comment? Look, so in this line I have exact comparison column, right? In this expression, true or false, right? So in this case, true. In this example, I don't even have exact comparison. Where is it gone?
It's a Boolean expression. It's need parenthesis.
Okay, let's try this.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's see. And yes, it is false, right? So essentially, as was rightly said, yeah, initially, by the way, it was false because what happened, since we had like a lot of expressions, right? So essentially this took priority. It actually said exact comparison plus this. It got string, and then it compared this string with this string, okay? And so it was completely wrong, okay? So if we put parentheses, we kind of define, no, it is a priority. You know what, this is first calculate this, and then concatenate it with this, okay? That's what just happened. A bit tricky, but this is the way priority works. So if you want to take priority and then concatenation happen, then you should take in parentheses. In this example, you have a method, right? So there is no such problem. So it's just one expression. So it's already by itself kind of is isolated. But here we have false. Exactly why? Exactly the same reason, right? So I just want to give a one reference to this. And I'm not going to go into deep Java, okay? But essentially, there's things called stack, and there's also a heap. Okay? So heap is very kind of basically your memory of computer, and stack is so just different organization. Okay, so memory organized. So both of them actually memory, but just different organized. Okay, and what I mean by that is that the actual reference, meaning that str1, its definition of it is in the stack, right? And then it points to actual value. In this case, my variable. And then str2, it might have same value, right? But then it might point to, it might have duplicate in this heap. Okay. So they are the same. But this is references where those are the values. Okay. And sometimes the way Java works, it kind of it's optimizing the code. You know, it might sometimes recognize that, you know, you want to initialize second variable with the same value. Oh, it's existing already, so let me point to the same. Sometimes might happen, it's like difference from Java to Java and not guaranteed, okay? More often than not, it's not obviously gonna be pointing to the same value. So bottom line is that when you do double equals, it will compare the addresses. Essentially, those are addresses in the heap. When you do the value comparison equals, then it actually compares those values. Okay. So that's why if you deal with strings in Java, you should always use the method equals. Now, having said that, if you look at different languages like Python, Ruby, or others, there is no such thing. Okay, so in Ruby, Python, you use this. Okay, and it's okay. So, but Java is a bit different in this case. So in other languages, this will be okay, but in Java, you should always use equals. Okay. So this is changes. This is compares the actual pointers to address in the heap, where this compares the values. Okay. Now I'm gonna change it back, and I'm gonna run this again. Obviously, this is going to be both false because it will be false, right? Compares pointers or references. Work in Java. Compares values. Okay. And yeah, go ahead.
In my case, when I compared these two equals, I mean equal, it worked. I mean, in not equal also worked.
Yeah, it's unpredictable. And so your
yes, but
yeah.
And when I created a new object string, then it didn't work. But in this case, it just worked. Put pointing to the same value, I guess, in a pool, right?
Yeah, yeah. So bottom line, use always this. I just give you some example, and it's unpredictable. I mean, I would assume it's different references. Why? Because Cucumber passes it, right? So Java has no idea what those values are because it's been passed by Cucumber. So I would assume it's always be different references, but doesn't matter. So bottom line, use this always in Java. Okay, the last one is. I'm gonna essentially get back to that homework, right? It said ignoring case, right? So the way you can ignore and compare, there may be a method for it. Let's say equals, yeah, there's a method, equals ignore case. Let's start to. Right. In this case, it says, I'm checking if they equal ignoring the case, okay? So sometimes like people don't know about this method and they do some trick, right? They say, okay, I want to make it to uppercase, and then what I compare to also make to uppercase. So basically, both of them making uppercase, okay, and then obviously you will ignore case, right? But this is hard to read. So you have like string to uppercase, and you another equals, and then the value is also conversion to uppercase. So you want to avoid that. Kind of hard. Sometimes like some languages there is no such thing, so you use this. But in Java there's nice method, so we're going to use that. Quick run, and you go to the final final check. Okay, so the comparison ignoring case. Then the final one is if it contains, right? So it says one string contains another. Let's check. Print result of partial comparison of those variables into console. If first variable contains second, okay? So essentially this one is going to be comparison. So you have that's it, contains is tr1 contains 2. And this one is basically str1 dot contains str2. So obviously it's not containing, right? So it's exact substring, which is not the case here. So it's false. I can test it like this. So what if I say just variable? Is it now going to be true or false?
True.
True.
Yeah, because now this var, right, is part of this. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So that's your homework. Just to play with different variables. Any question on this? The tricky part, this one. So you know about this now. Any questions? Right. Yeah. So let's have a break, about 10 minutes, and we continue after this. All right, so let's get back. I think it was very useful review to make sure you know exceptions and also the homework. And we're going to continue now deep dive into Java. So again, at this point, you pretty much now full access. So there's nothing anymore, right? So you have now full freedom to write whatever you want. And you can really take it far, right? Sometimes too far, so you should. So it's still like you have a blank screen, right? You still have to have boundaries, right? So rules, and of course, it's similar to what I showed you in the previous class was, but you have two states always, and sometimes it's random, right? Which state you're going to be next time. But the idea is that the more time you spend in the right state, the closer you become to left state. So I mean, you have basically more and more on the left side than the right side. But even if you're senior, you still sometimes have no idea what's going on. And the more you know, the more you don't know, right? But again, it's perfectly normal, and it's part of the education process. I already talked about the framework, right? Just take away that Maven manages packages and runs our project. We're gonna still be focused on Cucumber. Even in Java, you write Cucumber step, right? Now we pretty much focused on definition, even though it's not WebDriver yet, but soon will be. Okay. Just to remind you the definitions of Java, JDK, it's a Java dev kit, right? Which contains debugger, compiler. So actually, it's better to go from bottom to up, right? So say you have a jar. It's basically a bunch of classes that you can run with JVM. So JVM is runs classes, but it needs some basic libraries, right? So like a runtime library. So GRE contains JVM, and it has also basic Java classes like runtime, like a string. And then JDK basically has JRE plus it also has debugger, compiler, and things like that. So essentially, JDK contains it all. Okay, GRE and JVM. And jar here is kind of on the side because it's just a type of Java archive that basically a collection of classes to run. That's normally Java program is essentially packaged as a jar. All right, so you need to know the variables, and that's important piece of the deal. You already started to use variables, right? And the variables can have different types. So string is something we have started with. Then we have integer double, we have Boolean. There is also array and a map. So those are 5 main categories that so there's of course much more, but I would highlight this because those are the ones you use in automation. So string is the one that we have looked at, right? So string is basically used as often as like expart is a string, right? Or select is a string. The text you get from the page is a string, even if it's numbers. So you interact most of the time with strings. Sometimes you have to deal with numbers. And as you already know, true-false expression is basically a result of comparison. And that's important for us because assertion would look like that. And then basically array and map is a bit more complex types. So we already played with string, right? So I want to skip through it. And one thing to say about variable names, you use camel case, means that you start with lowercase. Okay, there's a Pascal case where you start with capital. That's how you write classes. Okay, with capital. But camel case is when you start lower, and then the next word instead of space, right? Instead of like doing like this. Java guys do not like it. That's preferred way. Okay. That's how you do this. Last name, middle names, and so on and so forth. Okay, yeah, there's some different kind of exercise. Essentially, you need to get used with the different methods that built in. That's built in as part of string. Okay, so the fact that you said this is a string, it means that you now have ability to run different methods on this instance variable that contains that value in is a string. Okay. There's a nice references to API, basically what methods are available. So that's it. We played with this exercise already. So talking about the variables, right? So there's talking about the numbers. There are many different types, and when you deal with numbers, you normally use primitive type. Okay. Primitive type essentially is something that is not using heap at all. So I talked to you about the heap, right? So you have an actual pointer in this stack, which now has value in the heap. In case of primitives, they all located in the stack. There's no reference to them basically. Okay. There's a scalar values right there. So, and essentially those are called primitive types, and integer, long, float, double are example of those. The difference that it's not class, it's just basically type definition, and it represents certain type, right? Essentially, it's a lowercase, and I have 4 examples here that are most often used. Out of 4, 2 most often used. So essentially, it just represents the memory that it would take to keep that value. Okay, if you say int, then you essentially limited by minus 2 billion to plus 2 billion roughly. Okay, that's the range. If you put something lower, it will be just going to up. Okay. Normally, though, int is used all the time. Why? Because normally you use like for loop, right, to count stuff. So essentially, you rarely do go to 2 billion. Okay. If you go like to a really large number, then you might use a long, which, as you can see, is a way bigger, and that will not, you will not have a problem. Okay. There is also even bigger than that, called big integer. If you need really, really huge numbers, but it's more like a for math cases. You don't need it for automation. Now, if you need a decimal point, those are all integers that do not have decimal. If it's decimal point, then you use either float or double. And this means a precision. Essentially, float just means floating, right? Essentially, you have decimal. And then double means it's double precision. So if here you always use integer, in case you use in decimal, then you always use double, because float is it's too kind of not good enough. Okay, so double is much better precision. Okay, so that's why when you do calculations, it's always used to use double. And again, of course, there is a big decimal type, that actual class, that give you a super sharp precision. Again, automation, you just don't use them. That's for developers. So yeah, so basically that's how you declare them, right? So the int I equals 10 or double name of variable equals 10.5. That's example. Okay. So I have a question for you guys. If you write in Java in this format, like a scalar values, for example, you put, or like you even like this int, or you know what, let's not even put int, let's just use scalar values. So you have 10 divided by 3. What will be result?
3.3.
3.
3.
So you have 3. Or you
If
have,
it's in,
It depends on type. If you want to get.
yeah, I'm saying that if you write like this, and you can prove it actually, and let's just test it. Okay, let's test it. Always good to check it out, right? What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a step. I just want to comment this out, and then you start. Let's say something like end. So you just want to basically play a bit with numbers, right? Essentially, I'll put numbers. It just doesn't matter. I just want to enter into that step. Okay, focusing, and I don't want to reuse the variable string step. So just an entry, okay. And here, what I want to do is just want to print, right? 10 divided by 3. That's it. Very simple. I'm running this. You can see just print 3. Because why?
Because it's
integer.
Integer.
Yeah, exactly. So this is, as I mentioned, this is, so those are both scalars, right? So you don't have variable, okay? If you had variable, you'd have the same, but so this is by default. You don't have decimal point. So if you don't have in programming, it means it's used for different purposes, not for math, okay? It's counting something, it's like doing some things. If you don't focus on decimal point, you have this whole new extra kind of area of usability, okay? But before I go there, let's say if you want a decimal, what if you want to get really result? Like if it's math, you just use this like 10.0, right? As long as one of those two arguments is going to be a decimal, okay? And by default, it's double. This is a double precision. It will give you a result. Look, that's how it gave you a result. So don't ask me why is it 5 not 4 here. That's a CPU talking. Okay, it's not even Java. It's just I said instruction to CPU, and then that's how it gives it. So it's obviously not correct. So that's why you have this. But again, who cares like about so like after like 15, right? Characters basically nobody cares. So you still round up, right? So round down or up to second decimal at least, right? So bottom line is that if at least one of those two is a decimal, then it will give you a decimal result. Means double. Yeah, double precision. That's what we want. Otherwise, don't use it, and just always round down integer. Okay. So that's the way it is. So what does it give us? It gives us an opportunity to have this operator. So what's this operator for? Who knows?
Division.
Remainder.
Reminder. Yeah.
It's a modulus operator, and it's give you a reminder. So essentially, what it says is like, okay, you divide 10 by 3. What's left? So 3 by 3 is 9, right? So 10 minus 9 is 1. So that's how it is. Okay. It gives you actually. So why is it kind of nice, right? Sometimes you have sort of tricky questions on interviews, like this one. Like take every third item from the list, every third, okay? And this is good because so if it's really a third, right? So 9, right? Essentially, the reminder is 0. That's how you check it, okay? It is 0. So essentially, the one like this, like so you have just some sequence. Okay. A sequence of this, and I run it. Then you can see a pattern. So you can see that every third item is a reminder 0. Okay. See 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, 0. Okay. So this is the third. This is the third. This is the third. Okay. So that's how you can check this. You can check you can have some loop, which you'll learn later. And then you can get this. Sometimes this is tricky thing. Like, they say like list of dwarfs, like, dwarfs sitting around you, and you want to, take dwarf's hats, and you want to, take every second dwarf hat from them. Some kind of weird task like that. You can change it to, like, if you want to even every second one, you just change it to 2, and you obviously have every second. So every second will have 0 reminder, okay, from the sequence. So that's what you go through, okay. So that's how this. Yeah.
I had interview this week, and there was, if it divided for 3, print fees. If it divided for 5, print 5. If it divided to fees, if it divide 3 and 5, print fees bus.
Yeah, it's a popular. Google used it actually. Now it's everybody used. So I'll actually, this will be one of the coding tasks. Actually, it's part of. This is a very popular task, by the way. Like a basic coding. I'm gonna give it to you as a homework, and I'm gonna review it. Okay, nothing complicated. You just need to know loops and branching. Okay, and yeah, it's a part also of HackerRank, and very basic one. So HackerRank and LeetCode, 2 example sites. You can, for free. You don't need to sign up for money. For free, you can really practice easy exercises. And you do not need more than easy for automation engineer, believe me, okay? As I said, sometimes you get crazy requests, okay, from interviewers. It means that they just maybe not in the mood, or they just pulled from the work, they're not happy about it, or just they have no idea, they just Googled it, okay? Rarely do you see crazy tasks if somebody who knows what he or she is doing. Okay, but you might have some. It doesn't mean that you have to go and run and learn these tasks. You probably never going to get it again, or you'll get it like once in 10 times. Better you focus on something that reasonable. Okay.
So I'm sorry. Could you put those in the chat? Those two websites.
Oh yeah, I'll definitely do it. Yeah, we're gonna start soon. Actually, exercises, and we're gonna also have a separate session. I'll definitely put it in chat right now. So this is a HackerRank and LeetCode. The HackerRank is good. When you sign up, you get a 30 days of code challenge. So you get every day a new challenge. Very kind of complicated, by the way. So about like after class 10, I would recommend start doing this. I mean, you can also look right now. I mean, there's nothing bad about it. Okay, but you're not ready yet. Just simple as this. So let's continue with this, right? So we have numbers, so pretty much obvious, right? So let's, yeah, this is like task here. What, I mean, you can have maybe looked up already the answer, but what's the result? If you can look at it, tell me. 14, right? Because the priority here is a division. So essentially 20 divided by 5, 4 plus 10. So that's what it is. Okay. Yeah, so I already talked about the primitives, right? Actually, this is a picture, don't trust it because it's string is not primitive, obviously, right? It just looks funny. But yeah, so there's a primitive type, which is like integer double. The Boolean is also not a primitive example. And essentially, who would want this, true or false? It's not used by itself, but it's used as a result of comparison or a result of assertion, okay? So whenever you have like dot equals, whenever you have a comparison or assertion, it's a result of it will be Boolean, right? And then you have a true or false. And you might want to fail the test if it's false, right? Or vice versa. So we already played with this, right? Comparison stuff. Okay, so Boolean is actually nice in a way that it's used as actual branching example, right? So there's a mentioning, right? We had a FizzBuzz coding task. You cannot solve it without a branch, okay? And a branching comes into simple operator. That's a conditions operator. And conditions operator is basically if-else operator, okay? So if we'll take a look at that specific example, let's just do it here, right? Because it's numbers. So if you, for example, want to initialize a couple of those variables, so you can work with them. Let's take a look at it. So as an example, let's say you have, let's do it this way, okay? I can have, let's say I rename this, say order numbers 10 and 3, okay? So I want to pass those two as arguments, as an example. And then I click here, and I want to recreate step definition. So yeah, I changed it. I recommend you do that same instead of changing the both places. Yeah, it made this for me. All I want to do is just copy this contents. Okay. And then what else do I change? So it actually takes those arguments. Okay, can you just copy?
Arguments?
Into it.
Yeah. So you change this basically num1, num2, and then obviously here you use the same, right? Two numbers. So the bottom line, I don't know here. Sorry, I typed by mistake. I don't know here what those numbers are. They pass to this method. Okay, so that's the point. Because if I didn't initialize it here, it will be kind of why do I do this? Doesn't make sense. but I have some method, right? And it has some 2 arguments passed from somewhere. These 2 numbers can be whatever it is, whatever possible, okay? But they obviously not integers, okay? So they cannot be decimal point. They're always integer. So let's say I want to compare them in print comparison. I use if-else operator, okay? So I say if, and that's what I do, right? So essentially this is a keyword, parentheses. So I take first number and I say if this is bigger than second number, okay? So that's a condition. That result of it is Boolean. And then I have the block. So in Java, you use blocks for different purpose, right? Everything is a block in Java. By using blocks and meaning that curly braces, you avoid, so it's kind of saved from like craziness around indentation, right? Like in Python, you don't need to use this, but you must use the proper indentation, like based on how it, like the space here, it will work or break. Okay. In Java, you're free to have like this, right? It'll be okay. The Python guys will kill you for if the, well, it will not kill you, but it'll just not work. Okay, it'll just be broken. That's it. So bottom line is that this is the print, right? And this is the condition. So as always, I want to start by saying what those numbers are. Okay, as out, I have number 1. Always good to know what you work with, because I have no idea right now what numbers can be. Yes, they are here, right? But I can have like all kind of things passed. Okay, so I can have all kind of different options to be passed. So so I need to know print them, and then I know what results going to be. So if I say number 1 more than number 2, then I want to just print something. Okay. So essentially, bottom line is that the way if works, that if this number is bigger, right? So essentially, this is true, then it will go inside of this block. Okay. You can see the method also has block, but it's always get in if you call it method. The whole block will be from top to bottom. Okay. This is also a class, right? So class also has block. Basically, block here just represents the class start and end. This method start and end. But here the block represents different. So here's the block is if this is true, this will be used. Otherwise, it will never get there. Okay. So essentially, what I want to say here, number 1 is bigger than number 2. Okay. That's all. Just want to show you this is operator, and then I'm gonna run this by just see I have the same name. So all I want to do is just I can stay on Java code and just click triangle green, so it is line to test. So result here, you can see that it did run 3 times, right? Because three times same step gets executed. But values are different. So here you have 10.3. Here's reminder, right? And then it says basically, yeah, it makes sense. 10 bigger than 3. In the second scenario, though, reminder 100, and there's nothing. Third scenario, reminder is 0, nothing. So why is it nothing here in here?
You do not specify else. You do not print out anything for else condition alternative.
Exactly. So you can have this operator as just if, okay, and that will work, but only if it's true, right? But if I want to also accommodate for false, then I have to use another part of this operator called else and another block, okay? And basically inside of it, I just want to print out that number 1 is less than number 2. It's the opposite, okay? Will it be correct here or no?
We need one more condition.
Yeah, see, like, it's not enough, right? Because, like, look, see, here's the problem. Let me run it. Now it's a logic, right? So you have to, like, this is branches, right? So branch 1, branch 2. So based on what, true or false. Okay. And so here is the tricky part.
They can be equal also.
Yeah, see that exactly. So the first one is, and this is the first one, is obviously bigger than 2, right? The second one is less than 2. And the third one, they are equal, but it is wrong, right? Because it says it's less. And why is it wrong? Because it checks the first condition, which is it bigger or not? It is not. So it assumes it's less, okay? But it also can be equal. So that's why the way it should be in place initially is that, so the way you write this, right, basically is that you have a diagram, right? Basically you have a some block at initial where you might have some kind of block that will tell just that you know, x equals 10, y equals 3, and then you have a condition, okay? And condition will be x more than y. And then you have a branch, right? So first branch here, if it's true, second branch if it's false, okay? And then you print something like x bigger, okay? If it's true. And here is a false. So we assume that it is basically y bigger, or like you can say xl less, right? But it's not, right? So, and how do you fix it?
If
Yeah, so if it goes into false, it's not just, don't assume, do another condition, okay? Another branch. And here you can check if they equal each other, okay? If they are equal, then you can say equal, okay? If they're not equal, so then you know, right? You know already, right, that it is not bigger and it's not equal. So then what is it? Less, right? So that's kind of the idea here, okay? Obviously it's about x. So that's kind of the logic you put on the diagram, right? And the exactly same logic you can put in the code by putting together if else, okay? So technically what you can do here, you can have simple if else, or you can have a nested if else, okay? So I'll show you an example here. Basically you can say else if, and you have another condition, another block, okay? And after that block you have else final. So that's possible, okay? That is possible to have. In this case, as a beginner, you should make sure you don't get lost in the brackets, okay? There is the initial bracket if it's positive, the second bracket if it's another condition, and the last bracket is if none of those conditions true, okay? So in this case, you have number 1 now equals number 2, and then you want to, in this case, say it's is equal. So that's condition that's a little bit more complicated, but pretty much what we have shown before, okay? So initial branch, checking if it's bigger. Now it's not true, then we're checking if it's equal or not. If it's true, it will just write it down and it'll exit, okay? It will skip this in this case. But so if it's this gets in, it'll skip other two. Okay, this gets in, it'll skip the last one. But none of those two, it will get in the last one. Okay, so that's now it's going to be correct. So that's pretty much, yeah, you can see the result now is correct. So here's equal, here's less, here's bigger. Questions? It's just a matter of how do you get used to syntax, right? So here, if you have never used Java, then it will have a hard time. But as you start more and more, you will get used to it. Again, in automation, you don't need complex Java. So it's just that you need to get used to not make mistakes and be able to do fast, okay, write fast. That's pretty much the idea, and that takes time. And the only way to fix it is just by practicing. There's no magic button that just makes it, you know, all available. Yeah, that's pretty much what we had done, right? So here's another example. It's just now interacts with the strings. Okay. So here it just says, okay, I want to have a step that says, you know, I want to print URL for some site. And the idea here is that it would accept this parameter and print the full URL. So how do you deal with these cases?
Switch.
Same.
Yeah, you can do switch, and we have not looked into it yet, and I'll show you real quick. But let's start with this first. Okay, so I'm going to comment this out, and I'm going to say, and I print URL for. So let's get implementation, create definition in Java. How do you rename this guy?
Is a URL or site name?
Just site name.
Yeah, just site or like page, whatever, right? So this is not URL because this is actual name, right? And we need to print URL. So again, this is nothing about WebDriver yet. We just want to learn conditions a little bit. So I want you guys ask to help me. So how do we solve this? So always imagine a specific value when you are tasked with this exercise, for example, right? You should always imagine a specific value and say, let's assume it's this value, okay? And in automation, you might think about boundaries, right? So that's a good skill. When you thinking out loud, you can think about boundaries. So what kind of boundary values can be past this step to this method? Let's think about that values first. Can you tell me an example?
We can have upper or lowercase.
Well, it may be empty. Maybe some value, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, lowercase, yeah, it's also kind of a good point. Yeah. By default, lowercase or this, right? That's also possible. Why not? Or just capped, right? So that's definitely possible. But yeah, nothing. For sometimes it's also possible null. Not so null is different than not empty string. So null means that there's nothing at all. So it means that there's pointer doesn't point to anything at all. There's nothing in memory. Okay, zero. There's basically null. Where you have empty string, it's an actual reserved memory, and it's just value empty. There's no string. Okay, so those two are different in a much different. Just so you know, and those are just different caps. So let's see.
Slava, excuse me.
Yeah.
How do you can print URL null? We are talking about I print.
Null is the input, not URL.
Yeah, so see, like tricky part that you cannot really pass null here, to be honest. There is no way to put null, you know. So it is possible to pass null from other method, but not from Cucumber. Cucumber, it's always must be some string, okay?
Yeah,
so like let's.
I'm talking about it exactly.
Yeah. I will definitely show null when we. Actually, I'm gonna reference here. I'll show you how to do it. For now, let's focus on other values. Okay, so if we see a value, let's just imagine real value, not just like a vanilla value, whatever. But somebody passes this, okay, or might pass also this. Okay? So we want to really print URL for this, right? It can be nothing, or it can be in this case not for Cucumber, not for exactly. Okay, so first of all, we want to put if, right? So you print if what?
Page equals ignore case.
Open bracket page.
Exactly. So page dot equals, right? And
why don't we use ignore case?
Yeah.
It'll be easier.
Yeah, this is a good point. I'll get back to your point, which I'm going to change for sure. But let's see what happens without it. So if page equals Google, then I want to print basically Google URL, right? That's it. Like HTTPS, tw, like this. Okay. So that's pretty much what I'm going to print, and that's pretty much it. Just around this. Okay. So you can see there's printed correctly. And the idea is that if you pass now like this way that sometimes people do, which is kind of hard to control, it's not going to print anything at all because it's not equals. So you want to use equals ignore case, okay? Or you want to first of all lowercase, for example, and then you call equals, okay? So it's like this is variable, convert to lowercase, and then you check equality. That's what it is. Okay. And then you print it. So that's a way to deal if you have you know, capitalized or all caps values. See, it prints nicely. So yeah, obviously it's recommend to use equals ignore case because that's cleaner. Okay. So obviously if I don't pass anything, nothing happens. Now the question is, should I somehow accommodate for that issue where nothing is passed?
Yeah, you can put the error message.
Yeah. Put else. And basically here I have an option to print. Let's say invalid.
Yeah, unknown URL.
Value.
Something like that.
Yeah. Or
unknown site page.
It's even better, yes. Unknown site, unknown page, URL, right? Or unknown URL for page this, right? So that's kind of much better, right? If that's the case. See, like it actually tells you. So it's now it's empty, right? But well, for example, what if you put Yahoo, right? If you didn't have that link, I mean, not even branch for else, then you would not even know what's going on. It's just nothing, right? Now you see at least the message. But I was, as I mentioned, right, always good to error out if something happens that you don't expect. So it's like exception happens, right? Out of normal. Is there some way you can throw exception? So in Java, you can actually say throw new error. Okay. You can have, instead of saying print line, you can say this. And you inside of it, you just say what has happened. What's the difference? The difference is if you really make an error by passing incorrect value, then you would just have failed scenario. Okay, because it says, you know what, you pass some value that's not correct. Hey, and that's the difference. So you can see here, it's red now. It's at error unknown. So it actually prints the same message, but it's now red and it's actually error scenario. Because as I mentioned, if you have like 100,000 scenarios, you would never remember to look at the logs unless it's a special scenario. You need to know it. You always will know it, and you always will look at the logs. So unless it's a special scenario that should probably run separately, you're never going to look into logs that deep. Okay, you're probably going to filter, maybe search. But again, it depends on your level of tiredness, right? If you have or not. If it's red, then you always notice it. So there's another way to do it. Essentially, is you can say exception. But if you say exception, then it's essentially checked exception. Means that you must also say in the method that this error happens. So you have to say, okay, it throws this generic exception. Okay, it's kind of extra syntax. So you want to do unchecked exception. Unchecked means that, well, if it happens, it happens. Sometimes it happens, you know. I don't want to accommodate for this. So this is more like for developers to use checked exceptions. So error is really a flavor of, it's kind of close to runtime exception. It's exactly the same. So runtime exception just says something happened at runtime while you run the program, right? I don't know what may happen, but just print this if this happens. That's kind of the logic, right? Essentially, it means that I have no idea whoever passes the value here. Some like weird passed. Just make sure you know them. Hey, something wrong. So runtime exception and error pretty much same category. Okay, so we're going to use the shorter version of error for that purpose. Okay. Right. So now if I look at this next step, do you want to support Yahoo? Yes or no, and how, if it's the case?
You would add else if else.
Yeah.
Else if.
Yeah, exactly. So same reason, right? So you just put another else if. And I just going to copy this guy and then just say, you know, if this Yahoo, and you know, I organize it so it maybe looks nice. I just basically print different URL. Maybe yahoo.com without 3W. Okay, it's not necessarily the same pattern. Okay, so that's it. So now it supports Yahoo, it supports Google. Even if I put this like all caps, all capitalized, it will still be working fine because you're using no keys. You can see here. What scenarios we have result. Okay. Now, for this case, like, look, it's going to grow, right? Eventually, you have another else if, and it becomes harder to manage because you want to support all those different sites. Okay. So what do you do instead here?
Switch statement.
Switch.
Yeah.
Use arrays.
Yeah, you can do well. Arrays. You can also well, but you need to know.
And for each, and that's it.
Yeah, you don't pass array. You pass only one value, right? So you, essentially,
you can do it two-dimensional.
Yeah, you don't want to. Well, you were talking about map now, right? So it's not really array; it's a map then. But in our case, we don't need that because I want to essentially same result will be achieved with switch. And what we want to do here, there definitely will be applicable cases for map. So keep that in mind, and we're gonna maybe use map for some coding challenges. And if you use it, some people will like it. Okay, so keep that for your kind of potential coding task, but do not overcomplicate if it's not needed. That's my recommendation. In this case, we just want to use simpler syntax, right? And that's what operator switch is for. So basically switch, right? And so you just want to make sure the proper operator is being used for that. Okay. And then you just use it. Okay, so I think I lost connection, guys. I'm back. Just switched to different network to mobile, and I'm gonna get back. So I think I probably disconnected, right? Can you hear me now, well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's okay. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get back to sharing, and we talked about switch operator, right? So basically, we want to use switch. So I want to use switch on some value, right? So in the older Javas, you could not at all use basically there's no way that you do switch on a string value, okay? But in new Java, obviously it is quite possible, okay? So that's no problem at all, right? So that's a way essentially to go in that case, right? So bottom line, you want to use a switch, and I'm going to use like a classical switch that like older Java supports, like from I think it's Java 6 or something. So basically, like, most often, as I said, Java used Java 8, and you will have this working pretty well. So like you basically have a value that you check, right? And you switch based on that value. And then you want to say, you know what, if it's in case it is this value, right? Basically Google, what do I do? Okay. So in case it's Google, you want to print the Google, right? Now, and it's a bit tricky of this expression. I'll show you what's tricky. Okay, and I'm going to run it, and you can see yourself what's tricky. In case it's Yahoo, you put Yahoo, and you print Yahoo, right? Now, if it's none of this true, then there's a default option. Okay, and in case of default, you can definitely use this. Okay, it like it looks nice, right? And it's supposed to be okay, right? Supposed to be okay. It doesn't seem to be, though, right? When we actually see how it is going to run. So I'm going to essentially do execution.
You will check the case sensitivity, or it should be the same values?
Yes, it actually makes sense. Yeah, exactly. You can do here, right? To lowercase.
So should we add the word break?
Yes. So if you don't add break, and that's what I want to show you actually. I'm going to comment this out so it's not disturbing. Okay, you can see, right? So I said, what's the pass value? The Yahoo, right? And for Yahoo, it printed Google, printed Yahoo. So it's kind of weird, right? So it's basically, the problem is this, that initially it's actually Google, right? So the problem initially is that
lost him again.
For Google, right? It prints everything. So essentially it gets into case, but it doesn't stop. So to make it stop, you need to break. Okay, break here, break here. You don't need to put break here because it's the last one. Okay, but if it has breaks, then it's going to be back to normal. So this is like, you can see, right? So this is the one for Google, and this is the one for Yahoo. Much cleaner than this, right? So it's easier. You can easily add more. So that's not a problem. Okay. Make sense? And now the new Java, basically from 14, you can actually do arrows. Okay. So instead of, you don't need to do breaks anymore. Okay. So what you can do instead of this, you can just use this approach. And this as well here. So you can now use this way, right? Obviously, you have to also use the same approach across. So you can just say one-liners what this represents. So if you use arrow, dash, and angle bracket, that means you don't need to use the break. That's a newer Java from 14. Okay, that's it, changed this, optimized a bit.
Slava, are there any other benefits to switch compared to if else if? Then
just make it laconic. That's the benefit, right? So you don't. You like the tricky part is that here you say ignore equals ignore case, right? Here you cannot say like ignore equals. Sorry, equals ignore. You can say here initial value, you massage, right? You say it lowercase, and then everything you put here is lowercase. So that's the way you fix that. Okay. So that's a switch operator. That's pretty much the idea of this operator. Okay. Yeah, it's just more laconic, shorter, to the point. Okay. That's a 14 version. I'm gonna put it back. More likely you'll encounter the version older like this. Okay. So when you use a column, and then you have to use break. In case you use arrow, you can have blocks. Like, for example, you can have several lines, right? So you just use block. Okay. And then you can have multiple lines inside of the block. If you have just only one, then you can do it like this. Okay. That's the idea. But again, I'm going to put this back. So breaks, of course. So that's another, this is operator at issue now. Now, the problem with this operator is that you cannot make like operations here. Like you're gonna do more advanced cases. You know, you can have a sequence. You can have actually a list of them. For example, you can have what if it's multiple? So you have Google, right? You can do like this. If you don't have lowercase, but you want to capture all different options, you can. This is the old way of doing this. Okay. In the newer, you can just do comma separated, like this, and then you do point to whatever you want. Okay, that's how you do it in the new version. Of course, you should change everything so it wouldn't complain. So you can have this. In older, you can just have a list like that. Okay. But of course, it's very limited, right? You only change this guy and then you compare this to every single value. So you cannot do a more advanced stuff. What's advanced stuff? Obviously, you cannot check like less or equals, right? You cannot check, okay, if it's divisible by 3, right? Then do that, right? There's no way to say divisible by 3 with switch statement. So switch statement, if you just have a list of values, right? You want to switch between them and then do different actions based on those different values. So that's why it's called switch. And so it's more like a cleaner, right? Where instead of this becoming more complicated, all you do is equals. That's the way to go. Much easier to read. Okay. So that's the idea. Yeah, that's switch operator. I think I want to do one more. So we have 5 minutes left. I want to show you one more operator, and because we're gonna use a different. Yeah, there's a switch here, by the way. Yeah, so I'm gonna show you one more operator. We weren't gonna go into arrays today, but I'll give it to you for reference, arrays and maps if you want. But I wanted to show you the for loop operator. So essentially, for loop is this one, okay? Let's see. So I want to do oops. Just want to show one more piece of syntax in Java. So what's the loops? Essentially, it's loop is a loop, right? If you do something very repetitive all the time, you write loop. So essentially, what's repetitive? If you want to print something multiple times, right? And you want to print something 10 times. What's the option? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, right? So you can do it like this, and it'll take 10 lines. You want to just print 1 10 times. So that's one way to do it. Easier way to do it is using for loop. So what's the way? So essentially, you say for each, right? So you want to put some kind of counter. So there's a couple of ways to write a loop for. There's a for each, and there's classic for. Initially, we want to show you for each. So essentially, you need to like put. Well, let's do classic first, okay? But really, each is good when you have an array. So classic is one that has 3 parts in it in condition. So you have first of all starting point. Let's say 1, okay. Then you have a condition to exit. Let's say condition to exit will be false, right? So essentially, you say you continue until this is correct, okay? So that's opposite of correct is exit. So you say I continue this loop as long as I is less or equals 10. So you'll do up to 10 times, right? Including 10. And then you have another piece of the for loop that says every time it loops, do this action. And you can say +1. Okay. So you just basically increment. So it takes take 1, initially it's 1. So this first part is initialization before loop starts. The second part is every time loop goes on, it checks this condition, it will continue until this is true. And the third part is every time loop finishes, before it checks next, do this action, okay? So what I'm saying here is that I'm gonna just do it like this, okay? Yes, this looks a bit more complicated, but I save a lot of space, and it's as long as you can read it, it's easy, okay? So let me run this.
Change to I.
I plus plus.
Print to I.
It will work too.
Yeah, I'll get there. But look, my point is that it does print 1 10 times. That's what I want. Okay. Yeah, as I said, also this can be optimized. So in Java, there's a way to say a++, right? And it basically means that increment by 1. You can also do ++i. It's the same, okay? There's difference in priority, but in this expression is the same. So this is the way you do it. That's another way to say, normally though, by the way, people don't use start 1, okay? They say I is normal index, so I stands for index, okay? So index normally starts from 0, okay? But if I do this way, what's going to be the problem? How many times
we do 11 times?
I'm going to print 11 times, so you can count like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, okay? So how do I make it still 10?
Remove the.
Yeah, remove it.
Because usually 1 to 10, right? I said now from 0, and now it should be only less than, right? So if it equals 10, skip it. So it will go until 0, and it starts from 0, it will go until 9, okay? And then that's when it becomes 10, it will not go into loop, so it will be 10, 10, okay? So this is the more often used classic loop. So you have some counter index, and then you have max value where a loop will break, and then you have increment by 1, so that's for that index. It basically says printed 10 times, right? You can even see how this index changes. So I can say print line I, okay? And in this case, it would print the actual index instead of 1. And you can see that it is printing from 0 to 9. So that's pretty much all for I want to show you. So it's a very simple loop, right? So, so instead of doing like this, right, I just use the for loop and save a lot of time, right, myself. I just put condition. How does it work? So again, 3 parts. Initialization for index. The right part is basically after each cycle, do this before you check this condition. Until it's true, it will continue. When it's false, it will exit. That's the for loop. That's pretty much it. So that's your task, guys. It's basically just to continue going to syntax. I'll give you some exercise based on what we have learned today. Essentially, mostly will be around the branching and around the loops. So play with those exercises, and we'll continue next this Thursday, actually. Okay. Thank you very much, and have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. Good night.